Scattered towers mark the villages which dotted the part of the Cornwall. Show the most southwesterly country of England it is. Okay, the cottages of a couple of 100 inhabitants. So, how many people are living? 100 inhabitants are living there. Around an ancient, that is old, moss grown church. That is very old, that's why here and there mosses were grown. The vicar of the parish, Mr. Roundhay, was something of an archaeologist, and as such, Holmes had made his acquaintance. And for this purpose, archaeological purpose, Mr. Roundhay and Sherlock Holmes became acquaintance, known to each other. He was a middle aged man, portly and affable, with a considerable fund of local lore. What is the meaning of local lore? LORE, that is given what? That is stories, that local things he knows properly. At this invitation, we had taken tea at the vicarage and had come to know also Mr. Mortimer Tregenis, an independent gentleman who increased the clergyman's sanctity resources by taking rooms in his large sprawling house. So here it is given the description of that house. The vicar, being a bachelor, unmarried, was glad to come to such an arrangement, though he had little in common with his lodger, that means where he was living, who was thin, dark, and spectacled man, looking how he was looking, it is given here, with a stoop which gave the impression of actual physical deformity, that physically he was not good. I remember that during our short visit we found the vicar talkative, but his lodger strangely reticent, a sad-faced, thoughtful man sitting with averted eyes, brooding apparently upon his own affairs. So, totally different with each other. These were the two men who entered abruptly into our little sitting room on Tuesday, 16 March, shortly after our breakfast hour. So, at that time they entered. Mr. Sherlock Holmes, said the vicar in an agitated voice, that is not in good voice, as he burst into our room, as he comes into our we can only regard it as a special providence that you should chance to be here at the time, for in all England you are the one man we need. So we have needed you, so you have to help us. Holmes sat up in his chair, waved his hand through the sofa, and our palpitating visitor, that is, was not confident with his agitated companion, hesitating he was actually sat side by side upon it. So they are sitting side by side. Mr. Mortimer Tregenis was more self-contained than the clergyman, but the twitching of his thin hands and the brightness of his dark eyes showed that they shared a common emotion. So they have any common problem. It is showing from their faces. Perhaps I had best say a few words first, said the vicar, and then you can judge if you will listen to the details from Mr. Tregenis, or whether we should not hasten at once at the scenes of this mysterious affair. So I am telling first few words to you. If it is interesting, then you will hear the rest of the part from Mr. Tregenis. Our friend here spent last evening in the company of his two brothers, Owen and George, and his sister Brenda, at their house, which is near the old stone cross upon the moor. So, where they were spending, and some other characters are coming here, said the vicar. He left them shortly after 10 o'clock, playing cards round the dining room table in excellent health and spirits. So they were playing cards there with their full energy. This morning, being an early riser, he walked in the direction before breakfast and was overtaken by the carriage of Dr. Richards. So come here, Dr. Richards, and with his carriage he was going there, who explained that he had just been sent for on a most urgent call to the Tregenis resident, Mr. So where he will come? Mr. Tregenis home they will go. Mr. Mortimer Tregenis naturally went with him, so he was going with him. When he arrived at the family home, he found an extraordinary state of things. Some extraordinary things he was finding there. His two brothers and his sister were seated round the table exactly as he had left them. But his sister was stone dead in her chair. She was not moving, while the two brothers sat on each side of her, laughing, shouting, screaming also, shouting also, the senses stricken clean out of them. So they are doing only. She has no reaction. All three of them, the dead woman and the two crazed men, retained upon their faces an expression on the utmost horror. So they are looking at her now with a horror. The convulsion of terror with their eyes bulging out of their sockets. So eyes are coming out in fear was dreadful to look upon. So it was looking very fearful. There is absolutely no explanation of what the horror can be which has frightened a woman to death and two strong men out of their senses. So they are getting very much fear. It is proving here. There is a situation, Mr. Holmes, in a nutshell, and if you can help us to clear it up, you will have done a great work. So if you can find the actual thing, it will be good for us. I had hoped that in some way I could coax my companion back into the quit which had been the object of our journey, but one glance, in one look at his intense face and contracted eyebrows, told me how vain was my expectation. So his facial expression was little bit different here. I will look into this matter, he said at last. On the face of it, it would appear to be a case of very exceptional nature. So this is a kind of different kind of case to us. Have you been there yourself, Mr. Ramde? Wherever you are present there of your own or not? No, Mr. Holmes. Mr. Tregenis brought back the account to the vicarage, and I at once hurried over with him to consult you. So I am here to consult with you about the matter. We shall go over together, but before we start, I must ask you a few questions, Mr. Mortimer Tregenis. So Sherlock Holmes was started to ask Mr. Mortimer. The other had been silent all this time, but I had observed that his more controlled excitement was even greater than the obtrusive emotion of the clergyman. He sat with a pale, drawn face, his anxious gaze fixed upon Holmes, and his thin hands lapsed convulsively together. So body language is changing here. His pale lips trembled, shaking as he listened to the dreadful, fearful experience which had befallen his family, that had happened with his family, and his dark eyes seemed to reflect something to the horror of the sense, and his eyes are showing that how much fear he is now. Ask what you like, Mr. Holmes, said he. It is a bad thing to speak of, but I will answer you truly. So I will tell you the true thing. Tell me something more about last night, said Holmes as he watched the young man keenly, minutely, properly. Well, Mr. Holmes, I supped there as the vicar has said, and my elder brother George proposed a game of whist afterwards. We sat down about 9 o'clock. It was a 10:15 when I moved to go. I left them all round the table as merry as could be. So again they will start there. Who let you out? So how are you coming out? Mr. Potter, the housekeeper, had gone to bed, so I let myself out. I shut the hall door behind me. I closed the hall door behind me. The window of the room in which they sat was closed, but the blind was not drawn down. Okay, so it was not totally dark. There was no change in door or window this morning, or any reason to think that any stranger had been to the house, so anyone can come in the house. Yet there they sat, driven clean, mad with terror, and Brenda lying dead of fright. In fear he was lying dead, with her head hanging over the arm of the chair. I will never get the sight of that room out of my mind so long as I leave. So I never forget the scene, the fearful scene I have seen there. The facts as you represent them are what certainly most remarkable. So these are very remarkable things. I fear, said Holmes, we must exhaust all natural explanations before we fall back upon such a theory as this. As to yourself, Mr. Tregenis, I take it you were divided in some way from your family since they live together and you had rooms apart. So your whole family are living together and your room height is far apart from there. That is so, Mr. Holmes. Though the matter is past and done with, so the matter has completed the reason behind it. We are a family of teen miners, but we sold our venture to a company and so retired with a considerable fund. And I have retired with a very well fund. I won't deny that there was some ill feeling about the division of the money and it stood between us for a time. But it will all forgiven and forgotten, and we were the best of friends together. So we are now living. So now we are living as a friend here. Looking back at the evening which you spent together, does anything stand out in your memory as throwing any possible light upon the tragedy? So, can you guess something what is going to happen here? There is something at all, sir. Where your family, nervous people, did you ever show any apprehension of coming danger? Nothing of the kind. So, what he was asking, telling no. You have nothing to add then, which could assist me. So, what will help me to do it for going further? Mortimer Tegner considered earnestly of for a moment. So, excuse them. There is one thing that occurs to me, said he at last. As we sat at the table, my back was at the window, and my brother George, he being my partner at cards, was facing it. I saw him come look hard over my shoulder. So I turned round and looked back also. The blind was up and the window shut, but I could just make out the bushes on the lawn, and it seemed to me for a moment that I saw something moving among them. I couldn't even say if it was a man or animal. So something was moving there, and he has watched that he was telling to Holmes. But I just thought there was something there. When I asked him what he was looking at, he told me that he had the same feeling. That is all that I can say. The same feelings, those who are sitting there. Did you not investigate? Whether you will not investigate or not, they are asking to Holmes. No, the matter passed and unimportant. You left them then without any forewarning to of evil. Are you thinking so that kind of any kind of evil it is? None at all. What did you do this morning? What were you doing this morning? Early morning, I had hardly started on my morning walk when I met the doctor. He told me that old Mrs. Potter had sent a boy down with an urgent message. I sprang on beside him and we drove on. When we got there, we looked into that dreadful room, that fearful room. We have reached there. The candles and the fire must have burned out hours before, and she had been dead at least 6 hours. So, 6 hours had already passed when we watched her. There were no signs of violence. She just lay across the arm of the chair with that look on her face. So no kind of any problem was happened with her. It is showing that, and simply she was lying dead on the chair. George and Owen were singing snatches of songs and gibbering like two great apes. Oh, it was awful to see. I couldn't stand it, and the doctor was as white as a sheet. Indeed, he fell into a chair in a sort of faint. He was getting senseless, and we nearly had him on our hands as well. So I'm getting them, capturing them. Remarkable, most remarkable, said Holmes, rising and taking his hat. I think perhaps we had better go down to the residence without further delay. So we will go there without any delay. Inside the house, we were met by the elderly housekeeper, Mrs. Potter, who looked after the family. She readily answered all Holmes' questions. She said she had fainted upon entering the room in the morning and seeing that dreadful company around the table. So some are fearful things are happening there. She had, when she recovered, thrown open the window to let the morning air in, and had run down to the lane to the road, where she sent a farm lad boy for the doctor. We entered the sitting room where the strange tragedy had actually occurred. The charred ashes of the overnight fire lay in the grate. On the table were the four guttered and burned out candles with the cards. So all those things are staying there, living there in that tragedical room. Holmes paced with light, swift steps about the rooms. He sat in the various chairs, drawing them up and reconstructed their positions. He tested how much of the garden was visible. He examined the floor, the ceiling, and the fireplace. But never once did I see that sudden brightening of his eyes and tightening of his lips, which would have been told that she saw some gleam of light in the utter darkness. So she was finding some clue there to solve the case. Why a fire here? Holmes asked. Had they always a fire in the small room on a spring evening? Also, the fire was burning here. Mortimer then explained what that night was cold and damp also. Damp also. Okay, for the reason after his arrival, he had asked for the fire to be lit to light down the fire again. On our return of the cottage, Holmes remarked, "We have only Tregenis' word that someone or something crept up at the window and frightened those people. But there are no footprints in the garden outside the window. So maybe he was telling us lie." The same afternoon, the great African explorer and the lion hunter Dr. Leon Stendhal visited us. We were very surprised when he asked us about our progress in solving the mystery. So that person was also asking us about it. Soon it came to light that he had been in love with Mortimer's sister, but marriage had not been possible. There was a bitter family quarrel about money, and the Mortimer had always thought the family had cheated him. In fact, Mortimer had visited the doctor a few days back while he was working. So the reason he was telling why he was here, the reason he is describing here. Next morning, we got the news that Mortimer Tregenis had died in the night with exactly the same symptoms. Holmes sprang up and we rushed at the house. A lamp burnt on the table beside the dead man. The bed had not been slept in. Okay, so no one has slept on the bed. The windows were shut, closed. Holmes quietly scraped some ashes and white powder from the around the lampshade and collected it into the envelope and put it in the envelope what he has brought with him. Remember, Mrs. Potter had said that she had nearly fainted on entering the room, and so had the doctor. He said there was a fire in the gate, and here there's a lamp burning. Surely something was burned in each case to cause toxic fumes that led to the deaths and the permanent lunacy. So something was burned there, and from the smell they were getting this type of death. We decided to try it on ourselves and put a pinch of powder on a lamp. Within moments, a musty, nauseating odor affected our brain and imagination. So something was there, that powder. Vague shapes loomed and threatened us. We are getting feared. Our hearts raced and we were strangely terror-stricken. We are getting very much fear. Our eyes seemed to pop out of their sockets. I dashed from my chair, threw my arms round Holmes, and together we lurched through the door, and soon we are lying on the grass in the garden. So they are getting out of the home room from there. So, there was no doubt that the powder had the powder to wrap the mind, inducing horrific hallucination and even death. So, the powder is the main cause. It was the extract of the most poisonous plant found in the wild heart of Africa called the devil's food. This is the thing of that poisonous tree. There was only one person who could have access to it, and that was Dr. Leon Stendhal. So, the doctor can access it to give. Mortimer must have stolen it from his house to finish off his family, and the doctor had taken revenge for the death of his beloved. So they both have made the conspiracy for that. My dear students, go for the learning the word meanings properly, and the question answers PDF is very much important that I have given with this video. And the summary, read the summary that is given on the PDF very carefully. Read again and again the summary, the story will be clear to you. Thank you.